The 1990s were a time of pure, unbridled excess and optimism when it came to themed entertainment. After a brief recession at the start of the decade, America's economic expansion kept interest rates and unemployment low and encouraged consumer spending. The baby boomers were having their own children, which created a massive market for children's entertainment and toys. When Michael Eisner declared the 90s to be the Disney decade, he planned to expand the reach of the Disney company beyond everyone's wildest dreams, but he may as well have been speaking for all of the entertainment industry. The 1990 saw the opening of Universal Studios Florida, a huge leap forward for a company that has started out with simple tram tours of studio sets. The opening of Back to the Future The Ride and E.T. Adventure saw Universal compete head-to-head with Disney when it came to the quality and scale of their attractions. Not to be outdone by an underdog competitor, Disney opened the Disney MGM Studios theme park and the Typhoon Lagoon water park in 1989, then opened Euro Disneyland in 1992, the Blizzard Beach water park in 1995, and finally Animal Kingdom in 1998. A truly insane run of parks to have been built in just 10 years. Universal weren't going to give out without a fight, and their third theme park, Islands of Adventure, opened in Florida in 1999. Speaking of fighting, the roller coasters were also having their own catfight in the parking lot. Cedar Point and Six Flags battled to break records for the longest, tallest, sexiest roller coaster. Everything was bigger, everything was better, everything was the most it had ever been. The United States in the 1990s saw an explosion of themed entertainment reaching heights that it would never really reach again. And outside of the colourful plastic worlds of Disney Quest and Mickey's Toontown, the rest of America also seemed to be sharing in the hazy sense that this was it. Canadian author Douglas Coupland spent his early 20s living in the Mojave Desert, reflecting on the alienation that him and his friends felt. They were detached from the culture of their parents, misunderstood by the mainstream, and drifting between menial jobs. In 1991, he published the book that would go on to define an entire generation, Generation X: Tales for an Accelerated Culture. He later reflected that we had, as a culture, seemingly lost the ability to generate activities or cultural moments that could define time. We had entered this era of timelessness. I would go to my local deli every morning and get the LA Times. I remember seeing a headline about communism being officially over, and I was just like, oh. That Francis Fukuyama meme was floating around, and it didn't seem strange to be entering an era that wasn't an era. Nothing seemed to be happening in the entire culture. That Francis Fukuyama meme that Coupland mentions refers to Fukuyama's 1992 book, The End of History and the Last Man. In 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved, and the Cold War ended. A year later, Fukuyama published his philosophical political book that was an extension of a 1989 essay of the same name. In it, he declared Western-style liberal democracy the political winner, arguing that societies naturally develop into democratic structures over time, and that there would be no more major shifts in the structure of human government. We had reached the end of history. Capitalism had won over communism. Any ideological battles were over. Every problem in society was solvable. There was nothing left to do but sit back and enjoy your Beauty and the Beast hand puppets from Pizza Hut. The 90s were a decade defined by the opposing forces of youth apathy and commercial exuberance. But judging by the sheer scale of the numbers, you can make the case that commercialism won out. Theme parks weren't the only industry reaping the rewards of America's economic boom. The music industry saw record sales with huge profit margins on these things called CDs. Garth Brooks existed. It seemed like you only had to breathe in the direction of a microphone to go 10 times platinum. The people were here and they were being entertained. The film industry also saw box office records being broken left and right. Film budgets grew bigger and bigger as the 80s blockbuster mentality took over cinema. Disney had their animation renaissance and special effects became more and more convincing, resulting in bigger and better explosions. The spectacle-laden Titanic became the biggest film in the world, grossing almost $2 billion in its initial theatrical run.
I'm the king of the world!
So what do we do when we reach the peak of society? When there are no more mountains left to conquer? We make animatronic dinosaurs. Steven Spielberg's working relationship with Universal began in the early 1960s when he was in his late teens. A mutual friend arranged for Steven to tour the Universal backlot with Chuck Silvers, the head of Universal's film library. Silvers was impressed with the energetic young director, who had already made a feature-length science fiction film starring his classmates back home in Arizona. He gave Steven a temporary pass to the Universal backlot so the young kid could learn more about movie making and do unpaid non-union clerical work. After hanging around the backlot in between university classes and directing several short films, Steven eventually landed a 7-year directing contract with Universal in 1968. The 1960s also saw the introduction of Universal's studio tour. Universal had allowed visitors to watch movies being made on their backlot since their opening in 1915. For 25 cents, visitors could sit on some bleachers and watch movie magic happen with an included boxed lunch. Unfortunately, the advent of sound recording for pictures meant that the backlot needed to be closed to the rowdy public in the early 20th century. The slow death of the classic studio system in the 1960s had Universal's executives searching for a way to increase revenue. Going back to their box lunch roots, they started to allow external tour buses onto the backlot to drive around the sets and then have lunch at the studio commissary. The tours, and the lunches I presume, were a success, and Universal quickly developed their own backlot tour with the adorable pink and white striped Glamatrams. As a young Steven Spielberg got his start directing TV movies around the backlot, the tram tour tried to tackle one of its biggest issues. It was all well and good to see a scene getting filmed or watch an actor heading to set, but a lot of the time the backlot didn't have anything going on. Universal needed a way to guarantee excitement for riders of the Glamatrams, no matter when they took a tour. Small, repeatable special effects were added along the route to create more of a show for the visitors. A lot of these were recreations of natural disasters and inadequately maintained infrastructure that weren't themed to anything in particular. There was the flash flood, the parting of the Red Sea, the collapsing bridge, and rock slide. There were also props from Universal's popular movies along the tour for visitors to take photos of. After directing a couple of road movies for Universal in the early 1970s, Spielberg was signed to direct his next film, Jaws. The film was a huge, if unexpected, hit. It defined the template for modern blockbusters and made young Spielberg famous overnight. Sensing an opportunity for business synergy, the Singapore Lake section of the tram tour was made over into Amity Island in 1976 to capitalize on the film's success. The main attraction was an animatronic shark that lunged out of the water at visitors, cheerfully going down the length of the tram to say hello to everyone who'd come to see him. I think the Jaws shark is so cute. I love his little fins and his worm-like body. Anyway, if Universal wanted to position themselves as a competitor to Disney in the theme park space, then the Jaws attraction on the tram tour was a nice little proof of concept. They were also lucky enough to have ended up with Hollywood's most bankable new director under contract. This was a partnership with a bright future. A decade later, in 1986, Universal added their most ambitious set piece yet to the studio tour. The King Kong encounter was an indoor attraction that the trams drove through, where a studio set had been staged to look like New York City. The tram passed a news helicopter that flew into overhead wires and crashed into a ball of fire, and then they would end up on an unstable bridge as they were attacked by King Kong himself. Universal had hired Sequoia Creative to help develop the new attraction, a new company that had been founded by 3 ex-Disney Imagineers, Bob Gurr, David Schweninger, and Thomas Reidenbach. Another ex-Disney Imagineer, Peter Alexander from Totally Fun Company, handled the attraction's art direction and Kong's animation. The King Kong encounter was the most expensive attraction Universal had ever built at the time at $6.5 million, but they had their sights set even higher. Universal were planning a brand new theme park in Florida to compete with Disney on their own turf. They approached Steven Spielberg to ask him to act as the park's creative consultant. You see, after the success of his earlier films at Universal, Spielberg had been making films for Warner Brothers and Paramount in the latter half of the 1980s. Universal wanted to keep his loyalties with them, and the offer of creative consultant was sweetened with a cut of 2% of the theme park's ticket sales in perpetuity and a cut of concession sales. This new theme park lent heavily on Spielberg's hits from the 1980s for attraction concepts. A much more ambitious boat ride based on Jaws was created for the new Florida park, as well as a dark ride based on his 1982 film E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and a motion simulator ride based on the 1985 film Back to the Future, which Spielberg had helped produce. Although it may sound like Spielberg had been given an empty job title to stop him running off to other studios, he was actually closely involved with the development of his rides. Peter Alexander had been an old college roommate of his, and Spielberg had visited the set of the King Kong encounter to see how this ambitious attraction was coming along during its development. He worked with Alexander again to help develop E.T. for Universal Studios Florida. He impressed on Alexander the importance of capturing the personal connection that children have with E.T. and the welcoming nature of E.T.'s home planet. He even looked like he actually wanted to be there when filming the pre-show video.
Hi. I'm Steven Spielberg, and welcome to the E.T. adventure. E.T., as you know, was marooned here on Earth 3 million light years from home.
If Universal wanted to rival Disney's theme parks, they had all of the ingredients by the time the 90s rolled around. They had successfully created highly technical, detailed, spectacle-driven dark rides. They had a brand new theme park in Florida which didn't rely on the old studio tour as the main attraction. They had ex-Disney employees in key creative roles within the company, and many more on speed dial. They had one of the biggest directors in the world locked into a creative contract with them. And now they're about to have a massive hit that was tailor-made for a theme park attraction land right on their laps. Although he had first met Michael Crichton when he gave him a tour of the Universal backlot as an enthusiastic teenager, Spielberg and Crichton's professional relationship started in the late 1980s. Spielberg produced the hit television series ER based on Crichton's screenplay, which had been based on Crichton's own experiences in Harvard Medical School. While discussing the show, Spielberg asked Crichton what else he was working on, and he got a chance to read an early copy of Jurassic Park. Although it would be several years until Dolly the adorable sheep made headlines for being the first animal cloned from an adult cell, there was already a general anxiety over scientific advancements and the ethics of playing God. The Human Genome Project was started in 1990. Over the next 13 years, institutions around the world mapped and sequenced the genes that made up human DNA. The 90s saw quite a few pieces of media tackling issues related to cloning, genetic manipulation, and technological advancements in medicine. The 1999 novel The Day After Tomorrow dealt with Nazi head transplant surgeries. The 1996 film Multiplicity is Oops, all Michael Keaton after the protagonist gets access to a cloning machine, and 1997's Gattaca imagined a future where children are conceived in test tubes based on genetic superiority. Jurassic Park's bombastic premise of a theme park filled with genetically mutated dinosaurs brought back to life satisfied the public's need for both escapist spectacle and reassurance about the direction that new technology was taking.
Can it happen? Because I know you've done a lot of research on this.
I wouldn't worry about it.
The book was released in October of 1990, and it was an immediate bestseller. Although Crichton had privately promised the film to Spielberg if he agreed to direct it, a bidding war for the film rights erupted after the novel became a smashing success. Despite bids from other studios like 20th Century Fox and Warner Brothers, with Tim Burton slated to direct, imagine, Crichton went with Universal's bid and stayed good on his promise to Spielberg. As soon as the film rights were secured, pre-production work began on both the film and a theme park ride.
We began the concept of Jurassic Park the ride while Jurassic Park the film was in production.
The setting of Jurassic Park is tailor-made for a theme park ride, but it's surprising to see development for a ride start before the film even had a script written. Development began on the ride in November of 1990, right after the bidding war for the rights had wrapped up. Universal was serious about investing in dinosaurs.
Is that this kind of research is tremendously expensive, and the question arises, who will pay for it? And at the moment, for better or worse, there isn't any pressing need to recreate a dinosaur. And in trying to think about how that might happen, or who would pay for it, the only thing that I could think of was that it would come from a desire for entertainment.
With pre-production on the ride greenlit, Universal started to assemble a creative team. Peter Alexander contacted Tony Christopher and Gary Goddard at Landmark Entertainment Group. Both Christopher and Goddard had worked at Disney before starting their own company in 1980. Their first attraction for Universal had been The Adventures of Conan, a sword and sorcery spectacular show. Much like Alexander, Landmark wanted to beat Disney at their own game. Another key creative figure was Neil Engel, Universal's creative director. Engel had previously worked at Disney as the project set designer on Splash Mountain for Tokyo Disneyland and Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland Paris. If you needed an impressive water ride, he was your guy. In late 1990, all the Jurassic Park team had was a rough script, but Landmark Entertainment was asked to brainstorm ideas for a theme park ride based on the book and what was known about the film. Universal's initial idea was to do a ride based on the Jeep chase scene early on in the film. Riders would be seated in cars similar to the ones that take the film characters on their doomed tour of the theme park and ride past animatronic dinosaurs. Early storyboards show the cars going through the legs of a Brachiosaurus, over a rickety bridge, and escaping from velociraptors attacking the car's sunroof. Getting realistic cars to speed up and slow down on a chain or an Omnimover system would have been difficult though, and a roller coaster attraction wouldn't have allowed for the storytelling and show scenes that the creative team wanted. Landmark Entertainment were also keen to do something different from the film to give the ride its own identity, instead of just poorly recreating a scene for the sake of business synergy. One of the scenes from the book that didn't make it into the film script was an extended sequence of Alan Grant and the two children escaping downriver on an inflatable raft. They pass through an aviary and go over the edge of a waterfall as a T-Rex waits at the bottom for them. In an effort to avoid duplicating scenes from the film, Tony Christopher pitched a raft ride for the theme park attraction, and Universal liked the idea. Spielberg agreed that the ride needed to do more than just imitate a scene from the film, and he was also excited about the idea of a water ride.
Yeah, Universal doesn't have a boat ride. Thrills, big drops, high capacity. I think that's a good idea.
Tony Christopher later remembered thinking, wow, maybe this is our opportunity to do a Pirates of the Caribbean type ride. While the film was in pre-production, the ride's development was kept simmering on the back burner as Universal waited to see if the film was a success. An initial budget for the ride of $67 million was proposed, almost the same amount of money that was allocated towards the film itself. Early in the development process, Landmark Entertainment took the opportunity to film the ride's cue video. This allowed them to use the film sets and Sir Richard Attenborough before they were destroyed after filming had wrapped. The creative team also continued to develop the raft ride concept. They mapped out what scenes they wanted to include and what dinosaurs riders would see and what music would soundtrack each moment. These pre-production ride blueprints show a layout that's remarkably similar to the final version, but with some scenes that didn't make it past the drawing board. The pterosaur Avery would have had the boat float through a broken section of a beautiful glass-domed aviary, while ominous pterodactyls watch riders from the treetops. Another cutscene included a live actor interacting with the boat, similar to the Great Movie Ride at Disney's MGM Studios. After making it through the aviary and entering the building for the final lift hill, a live actor portraying a Jurassic Park staff member would try and guide the boat into a dry dock. As the boat reached the dock and the actor prepared to get everyone to disembark, a raptor would burst through the fence behind them and drag them back into the darkness. The staff member would accidentally hit the controls as they were attacked, which would send the boat backward into the building as emergency lights started to flash red. The boat would then go around the floating carcass of a triceratops with huge gash wounds before heading up the lift hill to the final drop. Unfortunately, both the pterosaur Avery and the dry dock scene were cut. As the final layout of the ride started to take shape, the team built a large cardboard model to help them work out what riders would see as they moved through the ride. The river's path was cut out of the model, so team members could walk along the path the ride vehicle would take and see it all from the intended point of view. Concept art showed a lagoon with huge sauropods feeding on the lush vegetation, and a huge T-Rex coming through a waterfall. The waterfall was originally meant to be a play on the classic waterfall gag, where a rider thinks they're going to get soaked by a waterfall before it parts at the last minute.
Okay. Good.
Here, though, the waterfall will be parted by a massive T-Rex lunging at the boat before they headed down the final drop. Some of the concept art for the ride actually appeared in the film. In the early dinner scene, the sauropod lake artwork can be seen behind Hammond, and a piece of concept art for the ride's entrance can briefly be seen on the screen behind Malcolm. The ride and its massive budget was announced to the press before the film was even out, and it was initially going to be built in Universal Studios, Florida. I'm not sure why it was changed to Hollywood. If I had to guess, I would assume that planning for Universal's second theme park in Florida also started in the early 1990s, and the potential for an entire purpose-built Jurassic-themed land with multiple attractions was too good an opportunity to miss. Sometime in development, the ride's location was moved to the Hollywood Park, with their Florida version planned for the future. The ride was just one part of the massive marketing campaign leading up to the film's 1993 release. The projected income from the ride and the merchandise underwrote the film's budget, and by this point both Universal and Spielberg were savvy to the insane profit potential of movie tie-in merchandise.
Their skill and combined marketing clout will make Jurassic Park products the most prized artifacts of the 1990s.
Much like how the children of America couldn't escape from E.T.-themed lunchboxes in 1982, Jurassic Park let loose an avalanche of dinosaur-themed bed linen and boxer shorts and desk chairs and trading cards and supersized fries.
More than 1,000 products from over 100 licensees worldwide.
The nature of the source material almost encouraged the synergy, and the irony of the situation was not lost on anyone. Craig McInnes of the Toronto Star noted that if Jurassic Park warns against the grave perils of unchecked commercialism, it also plans to make a tidy profit from its massive merchandising campaign, which includes tie-ins with McDonald's and Choice Hotels, plus a Jurassic Park water ride set for Universal Studios in Florida and Hollywood. The failure of 1990's Dick Tracy and its massive marketing campaign would have been fresh in the public's minds. Disney had spent millions on commercials, stage shows, McDonald's toys, video games, and 600 other licensed products to promote the film. Dick Tracy had underperformed, and the planned ride at Disney MGM Studios was scrapped as Dick Tracy toys sat in Toys R Us's clearance bins. Would Jurassic Park end up with the same fate? Or would the public's love of dinosaurs usher in a new age of Jurassic Park-related media? You already know the answer to this. Jurassic Park opened in theaters on the 11th of June 1993. It was an immediate success of absolutely massive proportions. Within 4 months, the box office returns had broken the record set by E.T. in 1982, and the eventual total worldwide gross was $913 million. Although the film got mostly positive reviews, a lot of the press surrounding it focused on the sheer scale of the phenomenon. The huge box office returns were a frequent topic for the press, as was the vast amounts of merchandise that came along with the film. Stuart Clorness at The Nation archly reported that, "From the tone of the news report, I can tell that Jurassic Park's success must surely be my success too. As if in a potlatch, I can participate in the communal good fortune by offering my $7.50 to the next week's gross. To quote the ad campaign, be part of motion picture history. What a joy all of America must feel as the numbers rise higher and higher." When all was said and done, the film earned $1 billion from the box office, another $1 billion from merchandising sales, and almost $500 million from home video releases. With the line only going up, Universal had the confidence to greenlight the ride's development. While in pre-production for the film, Spielberg's main concern had been the dinosaurs. He knew that for the film to succeed, the dinosaurs needed to be more than real. They had to be actual characters. When discussing his vision for the film with Michael Crichton, he focused on the dinosaurs as if they were actual animals. He discussed how they would move, how fast they would run, how their breath would fog up a window, and how their pupils would dilate. He dismissed Crichton's early concerns about the feasibility of all of this and the limits of special effects. Effects, he said, are only as good as the audience's feeling for the characters. Much of the film's pre-production focused on figuring out exactly how they were going to bring these extinct animals back to life in a way that felt believable. Spielberg was unsure how far computer-generated imagery could go, so he initially looked at physically building the dinosaurs as mechanical puppets, animatronics, and stop-motion figures.
I was very impressed with Bob Gurr and his creation at Universal Studios with King Kong, which basically is like a big inflatable balloon that moves with wonderful smoothness. You can actually see muscle tone moving underneath the fur. And I was very impressed with that. And so Bob Gurr and I had some initial conversations about making some of the dinosaurs full size. Matter of fact, I initially wanted to make all the dinosaurs full size, and that of course was just my wishful thinking.
Bob Gurr did do some early consultation work on the dinosaurs for the film, but Spielberg ultimately ended up working with Stan Winston. Winston was already a legendary creature designer and special effects artist by the 1990s. He had worked with James Cameron on The Terminator and Aliens, as well as on other classics like The Thing, Predator, and Edward Scissorhands. He had his own workshop that produced the animatronics and puppets needed for convincing practical effects. Phil Tippett also joined pre-production to create stop-motion miniatures of the dinosaurs. Tippett had previously worked on all 3 Star Wars films, and his developments in stop-motion technology had earned him an Oscar for the 1981 film Dragon Slayer. He had pioneered an evolution of stop-motion known as go-motion, where a stop-motion puppet would act out pre-programmed movements on camera, allowing for motion blur and a greater sense of realism. Tippett worked on go-motion tests of the dinosaurs running, while Winston's workshop made life-size animatronics for the close-up shots. Spielberg had planned to augment the physical dinosaurs with digital effects from the computer animation team at Industrial Light and Magic. They would be responsible for combining the physical dinosaurs with footage from set and any cleanup that was needed. But then Dennis Muren, the head of the computer graphics division, told Spielberg that his team could create realistic, walking, breathing dinosaurs with digital animation. Spielberg was skeptical.
And then eventually to the suggestion that Dennis Muren made to me, where he said, would you ever consider letting us do most of the full-size dinosaurs from head to toe on the computer? And my first reaction was, well, prove it.
Muren and his team worked on a test shot of skeletal Gallimimus running across a still image of a field, just to get the basics down first. The initial screening of the test footage blew Spielberg away. Further tests with fleshy dinosaurs in the harsh, unforgiving light of day convinced him that fully digital dinosaurs were the key to making them into real characters for the film. Physical effects were out, digital ones were in.
We are hands-on guys. We're used to actually walking up to the puppet, making each of these moves by hand. I'm not used to sitting down on a keyboard and having to hit buttons. It's kind of like animating with like boxing gloves on.
Just like for the film, Spielberg was aware that the dinosaurs were the key to making a Jurassic Park theme park ride believable. Early in the ride's development, he reportedly said, "I'm concerned about the dinosaurs. If the ride is to be done with those herky-jerky animated figures I've seen in amusement parks and museums, forget it. It will only work if the dinosaurs are astonishingly real." His skepticism must have subsided as the huge dinosaur animatronics for the film were developed, but creating a dinosaur that can do a complex movement once versus every 15 seconds for years on end are two very different things. There's a rather prescient quote from a 1992 Variety article about the possibility of reusing the animatronic dinosaurs from the film. The reporter asked, "What happens to the great Stan Winston dinosaurs? Some of them 17 feet tall and 40 feet long." "They'll rot," said Stan. "At least their outer skin will disintegrate, because they were created to be very pliable to react intricately to the more than 10 men who operated the innards." But Spielberg assured the dinosaurs could be used for another movie or the Universal Studios parks. The film's animatronics did not get reused for the ride. In fact, Universal didn't even go with a company that had a background in theme park development. Instead, a Utah robotics company called Sarkos Technology and Robotics Corporation was contracted to develop the dinosaurs. They had developed robotics for the United States government, mostly mechanical arms and exoskeletons of varying styles. The fact that their mechanical arms had gone to space and worked underwater seemed to really impress Universal executives. In 1990, they had been contracted by Universal to do a failure analysis on Universal Orlando's King Kong animatronics that kept breaking. Universal were happy with their work, and they were considered for the Jurassic Park contract. It's perhaps not entirely fair of me to say that they had no theme park experience, as their most recent contract had been with Disney. They had worked with Disney to develop a new model of animatronic for The Wicked Witch of the West in the finale of the Great Movie Ride at Disney MGM Studios. Universal screened pre-release clips of the computer-animated dinosaurs from the film for Sarkos and asked them, "Can you build us some dinosaurs that will look and move as naturally as these?" Sarkos, and I quote Universal themselves here, agreed to try. Gary Goddard from Landmark Entertainment was less enthused about Sarkos' work. He said, "I registered my objection to the use of Sarkos as I felt they did not understand our business. But the guys at Universal were enamored with these NASA guys who promised them lifelike dinosaurs. But Sarkos had never really done anything like this, and they didn't create skins. And from my experience, I know that in the AA business, how the skins attach and work with the animatronics is critical. If they didn't work well together, then you had either bad animation or bad skins, breaking, tearing, or worse, both. I had also, in one of my last meetings with then project manager number 4, I think, and the executive team, and I brought up the skins issue and no one there thought it was any big deal. Landmark Entertainment also advised that the dinosaurs should be placed under rock overhangs or under dense foliage to prevent UV exposure in the sun, which would further degrade the animatronic skin over time. After they had developed the storyline for the ride and laid out the key scenes, Landmark's involvement in the ride was limited as Universal's internal teams took over. Sarkos built on their work that they had done with Disney. The Wicked Witch of the West was the first of Disney's A100 series of animatronics, which included quite a few new features that allowed for more realistic movement. One consistent problem with older animatronics was the lack of control over the end of a figure's movement. Fast movements with sudden stops would cause the whole skeleton to shake unnaturally, but the A100 series could replicate quick movements with more fluid precision and less shaking. This is also why most animatronics are constantly waving their arms at a leisurely pace instead of, acting like a normal human. There's quite a few references in the ride's press kit to dinosaurs reacting to the riders in the boat and feeling alive. It's hard to parse how much of this is marketing hyperbole and how much of it is actually some brand new innovation based on, motion detection or something. Disappointingly, Neil Engel was quoted as saying, "These are not just robots, they are thinking machines. When an arm moves, the corresponding shoulder moves. Their bodies respond like those of living animals." Which, that's not artificial intelligence, Neil, that's just how physics works. Sarkos created 16 dinosaur animatronics in total for the ride's 12 scenes. A team of 15 sculptors worked on the designs, and welding shops across the country were contracted to get the machines finished on time. An original recipe for the skin was developed, which was an elasticized plastic-based compound. As this was a boat ride, many of the animatronics had to be soaked or even fully submerged in water, and Sarkos was really banking on their experience in underwater hydraulic arms to make this work. While the dinosaurs were being developed, the ride vehicles were being made by Vekoma. Designed to look like a large inflatable raft, they could seat 25 people in 5 rows of 5, making them the largest ride vehicles in the world. Thousands of tropical plants were imported to create a lush South American jungle, and the ride's rockwork was designed by sculptor Vasily Varelas. Varelas had worked on many lovely rocks over his long Hollywood career, my personal favourites being Big Thunder Mountain and Splash Mountain. The final cost of the ride ended up being over $110 million, twice the budget of the film the ride was based on, and the biggest budget for a theme park ride ever at the time. Universal were attempting to compete with Disney, sure, but they were also trying to push the boundaries of themed entertainment. They weren't going to become a serious alternative to Disney with a modest dark ride and a couple of janky dinosaur animatronics. This was an all-chips-in bet that spending big would return big, and given that profits in the entertainment industry were only increasing, it was a well-reasoned one at that.
We're actually creating technology. We're doing things with animation that has never been done before, and we're doing it on a scale that here before has never ever been created.
There's no water ride in America that has this kind of a drop with this degree of sophistication to it.
It has to break new ground and new technology. The audience for theme park rides is almost as voracious as the audience for motion pictures. It's like, it's got to be better than the last one.
There's no better theme park ride in the world. This is it.
In the Rise press release, Neil Engel said, "So much of the adventure depends on entirely new technologies, whole new ways of doing things. If there is such a thing as a turning point, at which we move totally into 21st century amusement rides, this ride is where we mark that point." Jurassic Park the Ride opened on the 21st of June 1996 at Universal Studios Hollywood. The public marketing campaign leading up to the ride's opening had been extensive, with magazine coverage, newspaper articles, television adverts, and radio coverage. The ride's 84-foot drop was the biggest and steepest in the world, and the lifelike dinosaur animatronics were teased in press photos. Universal's goal of having guests ride the movies was echoed in the ride's tagline of "You'll wish it was just a movie."
Face your fears. Jurassic Park, the ride. Only at Universal Studios Hollywood.
The marketing blitz didn't stop at traditional media. A browser game called Jurassic Park the Ride Online Adventure was launched a few months later in August to promote the ride. It played like a point-and-click adventure game, with the player being put into the shoes of the park's operations manager who needs to escape from the collapsing Jurassic Park.
Thank goodness you're here! The situation is out of control, it's very bad!
But because this is promotional material for the ride and not the movie, the details are a bit different. In this timeline, Jurassic Park opened to the public and was a success. On the InGen wiki, the player can find employee notes talking about the success of selling Compy toys to children and a seniors discount day for the park. Also, the park's main attraction is a man-made river ride instead of a land-based jeep ride. It's a lovely, janky-looking old game with some genuinely creepy moments as you're stalked by a raptor through the halls. Unfortunately, the game seems to be unplayable now with the death of Flash, but the in-universe wiki still exists as a barely functioning Slovakian version.
Vítajte v systémovej administratíve.
If you're up for an old web wizardry challenge, you might be able to get it running. The scale of the marketing matched the scale of the ride. Jurassic Park the Ride was part of a 6-acre mini-land at Universal Hollywood with a themed cafe and gift shop. Universal Studios is located in the hills behind the Hollywood sign, and the difficult terrain meant that the theme park was split into the upper lot and the lower lot, with big escalators running between them. Jurassic Park the Ride was located on the lower lot, and the lack of available land meant that the designers had to make good use of the space. There's a lot of verticality to the ride, with the huge beige tower containing the ride's lift hill and drop dominating the area. Jurassic Outfitters provided children with all of the dinosaur toys they desired, and a new T-Rex t-shirt to wear if they got soaked. There was also the Jurassic Cove Cafe selling Brontosaurus burgers and rotisserie chicken. Ahead of the ride's opening to the public, a charity gala was held on June 15th to raise money for the Starbright Foundation. The guest list was a who's who of 90s stars: Angela Bassett, Robert Rodriguez, David Hasselhoff, all talking about how wet they are.
You are soaking wet.
Yeah.
He's soaking wet. I'm a little wet.
You are soaking wet.
You are soaking wet from head to toe. Everybody's getting soaking wet. What is that?
When I saw Amy earlier, she was lightly sprinkled. Now you are thoroughly soaked.
I'm thoroughly soaked.
Underwear soaking wet right now. That kind of sums up the whole ride. So if your underwear is wet, the ride is on.
It was wet. That's all I have to say. It was wet.
Okay, I'm going to go on a slight tangent here, but the Starbright Foundation was a spin-off of the Starlight Children's Foundation. Spielberg was the chairman of this spin-off charity, and the foundation's goal was to build an online virtual universe where children with long-term illnesses like cancer could connect with others like them. The software was called Starbright World, and there were 3D lands like Sky World, Cave World, and Tropical World. Children could fly around the worlds and talk to other children as avatars through text and audio, and even turn on real-time video to see and talk to them. Bear in mind, this was in 1996. AOL was still charging by the hour, and few people had really used the internet, let alone real-time video conferencing. Unfortunately, the project was shut down a year later due to stability issues, and the software company that created it would go on to try and sue Blizzard and Bungie by claiming that they owned the concept of a scalable virtual world. Their lawsuit against Blizzard was only recently thrown out in 2022. So, Jurassic Park The Ride's opening gala helped fund a metaverse for sick children. I know this information, and now you do too. Anyway, back to the ride's opening.
And then there's a T-Rex right here, and then before you know it, you're on this horrible, horrible drop, and then you're all wet, and it's fun. I felt so bonded with the people in the car with me.
You felt so bonded. Is that what the ride does to you? It bonds people?
Yes, yes.
Because you're going through an experience together?
Exactly. I feel like I love humanity at this point.
Steven Spielberg and Jeff Goldblum officially opened the ride on the gala day by attempting to light a beacon with burning torches. The ride opened to the public a few days later on June 21st. Visitors entered the ride through a huge reproduction of the iconic gate from the film. The ride's cue video has John Hammond welcoming visitors to Jurassic Park, featuring a perfectly safe boat ride where nothing can go wrong. New footage of park staff in the ride was intercut with footage from the film to create an immersive video that made the area seem like a real working dinosaur park. Graphic elements were also added to display facts about the dinosaurs that visitors would encounter and the boats that they were about to board. Some cut footage shows that John Hammond was going to reference the events of the film. The Hollywood Park was supposed to be a new park that was built after the destruction of the Costa Rica one in 1993.
Perhaps I should just make note that the Costa Rica operation shut down back in '93. You might recall the wee problem we experienced, only due, I might say, to sabotage.
After leaving the loading station, the boat immediately made its way up a small lift hill. The first scene had the boat floating through a little greenhouse tunnel. Richard Kiley returned to narrate the ride, as he had done for the Jeep ride in the film, and he had a small introduction speech that welcomes riders to Jurassic Park.
The ever-flowing, come with us now to a time before man.
I don't know why, but this little tunnel is one of my favorite sections of the ride. The film has a similar slow start to it. The first dinosaur doesn't appear on screen until 20 minutes in, and there's a wonderful sense of anticipation before the awe of the Brachiosaurus reveal. A 6-minute-long theme park ride doesn't have the space to draw out that first reveal quite as much, but I think it's an important part of setting the tone for the story the ride is trying to tell. It's a bit like the swamp and the caverns in Pirates of the Caribbean, other favorite scenes of mine. They're a slow build-up that makes the reveal feel that much more exciting. I also love the production design on the first Jurassic Park movie, which the ride copies. I love the warmer colors and the natural materials from Costa Rican architecture, combined with the lurid 90s graphic design sensibilities. Every zoo and museum and aquarium and planetarium and upmarket toy store in the mall cribbed from the film's style after it was released, and in a way it almost feels like we all got to visit Jurassic Park as kids. That particular shade of 90s beige with all the fake plants makes me want to buy one of those plastic buckets of tiny dinosaurs. I was never allowed one as a kid, but still, I yearn. At the end of the tunnel, the doors of the greenhouse opened to reveal the Ultrasol Lagoon, a spacious lake surrounded by trees and waterfalls. A mother sauropod and her baby were hidden behind the bushes, feeding down by water level. As the music swelled, they lifted their heads up high above the boat to create the ride's first wow moment. They continued to call back and forth to each other as the boat went underneath their massive necks. There was also some Psittacosauruses chewing on some plants further along on the banks of the lagoon. Next, the boat went into a rocky waterfall cave as it entered Stegosaur Springs. A baby stegosaur was visible on a rocky outcrop to the left above riders, and it would do a cute little wiggle as the boat approached it. The annoyed mother would then appear out of the trees to the right of the boat, and as the riders went around the bend, her tail would splash in the water as it came perilously close to hitting them. Just after the mother stegosaur, riders saw two Compsognathus fighting over a popcorn box. As the boat began to float towards Hadrosaur Cove, a loose Parasaurolophus bursts out of the water, soaking riders and knocking the boat off course. The boat then goes through a high security fence and into the raptor containment area. A raptor pen was filled with trees being rustled by unseen raptors, and the electric fence surrounding the pen was broken and sparking. A voice over the intercom tells the boats that they've gone off course, and a T-Rex roar is heard in the distance. A wrecked boat was filled with umbrellas and ponchos and t-shirts of the unfortunate tourists who came before you, and a Dilophosaurus sat chewing on someone's raincoat. There was also a little jab at Disney here, as an abandoned Mickey Mouse hat sat floating in the water. The boat rounded the next corner to see a jeep teetering on the edge of the retaining wall as more T-Rex noises are heard. It tips over the edge and falls towards the riders, creating a huge splash as the broken horn blared. Two more Dilophosauri pop out as the boat starts to head towards the Environmental Systems building, and this time they sprayed venom on the riders. The boat floated into the Environmental Systems building and started to head up a lift hill, while a voice on the intercom says that an emergency evacuation will be attempted on the platform up ahead. The boat narrowly escaped some velociraptors, one of which burst through the ceiling and another one was just hanging out in the tunnel, I guess. When the boat reached the top of the lift hill, sirens began to blare, and the boat passed under a curious T-Rex that had come through the ceiling. A countdown begins, saying that life support systems will terminate in 15 seconds due to the toxic gas that's leaking into the building. The boat rounded one final corner to see a waterfall ahead of them, and as the countdown begins, a voice on the intercom yells, "It's in the building." The T-Rex burst through the foggy waterfall and lunged towards the riders, and then the boat dropped down the side of the building to avoid it one final time. The drop ended in a massive splashdown, and then the boat floated back to the loading station. An abandoned can of Barbasol could be seen on the rocks as a little nod to the plot of the film. After a career break in the mid-90s, Steven Spielberg's long-awaited return to directing was the 1997 sequel to Jurassic Park, The Lost World. Released just a year after the opening of the ride, the film was another great example of business synergy and would have surely increased attendance numbers. In 1999, Universal's third theme park, Islands of Adventure, opened in Orlando, Florida. One of the park's 6 themed islands was based on Jurassic Park, and it had its own version of the river ride from Hollywood. When Universal Studios Japan opened in 2001, it also had its own version of Jurassic Park the Ride. Both of these other versions have slight differences from the original in Hollywood, but the spirit of the ride remains the same. It is a truth universally acknowledged that an animatronic positioned near water must be doomed to rapid decay. I'm afraid Jurassic Park the Ride didn't escape the fate that befalls so many water rides. The dinosaurs were heavy pieces of machinery that were near or even fully submerged in water, and they needed to look good while performing complex movements day in and day out. A strict maintenance schedule, regular skin replacements, and seasonal shutdowns for more time-consuming repairs are all needed to keep animatronics like this in good condition. The Ultrasaurs were one of the first things to go. Having a wet dinosaur at that scale with such a huge range of motion was very ambitious, and I don't know if Universal ever really pulled it off. They look a little rough even in footage from the ride's opening year, and the physics of the neck rising up out of the water never really came together in a way that felt realistic and plausible. Eventually they stopped fully coming up out of the water and just sort of hung there. I remember the first time I watched a video of this ride in the early 2010s, and I was so confused as to why the ride was even allowed to be run like this. Like, what's happening? Is she okay? Why is nobody helping her? The Stegosauruses also started to seize up. The baby stopped doing its little wiggle, and the mother's tail stopped splashing riders in the boat. Instead, it just sort of limply dangled in the water. When the ride was first built, the Parasaurolophus was a very impressive animatronic that shot out of the water at great speed, and you can see from opening year footage that it rose up to show a lot of the dinosaur's body and towered over the boat. Naturally, the drag of the water and the degradation from being submerged most of the time took its toll, and eventually only its head weakly rose above the water. The Jeep crashing down was another effect that was not long for this world. The car's slide down the wall got slower and slower, and towards the end of the ride's life, it wouldn't crash down at all. Sometimes it got stuck at the top, sometimes it got stuck at the bottom, so many variations of broken to look forward to seeing. The spark effects on the Raptor enclosure were eventually turned off too. The Dilophosaurs popping out also got slower and slower, as did the Velociraptors jump scaring you in the tunnel. The T-Rex head coming through the ceiling held up well, but a head on a stick is pretty hard to mess up. The T-Rex over the drop also held up well, even if the timing didn't always work out. The dinosaurs in the building stayed in much better condition than the ones that sat outside. The animatronic's skin quickly faded from the sun, and then started to crack and peel from the stress of repetitive movements. It is a little hard to tell exactly what state the dinosaurs were in at any given time. Animatronics are complex pieces of machinery with demanding jobs, and they often have multiple modes that they can operate in. Known as B modes, these are variations of the animatronic's movements that are less demanding to stop any further damage before maintenance has time to take them out and do a full repair job on them. The rough shape and limited motion of the dinosaurs in the 2000s could be them running in B mode, or it could be the toll that the water and the UV exposure took on them. Also, it's hard to tell because a lot of the footage from the time looks like this. The ride had a big refurbishment for the 2007 summer season. Water cannons were added to the splashdown for a wetter-than-ever experience. The dinosaurs were fixed up, and one final Dilophosaur was added to the rocks after the splashdown in case you weren't wet enough yet.
It was wet! That's all I have to say, it was wet!
This refurbishment was bizarrely promoted with a photo shoot in the winter 2006 swimsuit edition of Sports Illustrated. Although the ride had small annual refurbishments over the years, it had become exactly what Steven Spielberg had feared. A mediocre thrill ride filled with sun-bleached, herky-jerky dinosaur animatronics. Unable or unwilling to do the maintenance required, the ride continued to limp along. In 2018, Universal Studios announced that the ride would be closed and rethemed to Jurassic World to match the new direction the franchise had taken after the 2015 film of the same name. Jurassic Park The Ride closed on September 3rd, 2018, and reopened the following year in July 2019 as Jurassic World The Ride. The ride track and many of the show scenes were left intact, albeit with a coat of millennial grey over it all. The big Ultrasaur Lagoon was replaced with an indoor section that takes riders through a Mosasaur aquarium. Stegosaur Springs is the same, and the animatronics had a much needed update, although the Parasaur still struggles to leap out of the water. The spitting Dilophosaurs, wrecked boat, and the falling jeep were all removed, and the riders now travel through a rather empty Predator Cove. Instead of going off track and into a maintenance building, the boat now goes up the lift hill to visit the T-Rex in her beautiful indoor forest enclosure. The new finale has the original Rexy animatronic fighting a massive Indominus Rex animatronic over the heads of the riders before they go down the drop. Oh, and Blue is here too.
So I think CGI will be just another tool to make filmmaking easier. But this technology in 10 years is going to be awesome, more than I can even imagine sitting here talking to you.
By the 2010s, Universal had developed a reputation for being cheap bastards who relied heavily on screens for all of their new attractions, a far cry from the no-expense-spared approach they had taken with the original ride. The Mosasaur Aquarium is a comically perfect example of this. They replaced a large physical set and huge animatronics with a wall of screens. Very nice screens, but screens all the same. There's a lot of debate about the use of screens over physical effects in modern rides, and I think some of that is actually a debate on what even makes a good theme park attraction. Is it pure novelty? Is it advanced technology? Is it to feel a physical thrill? Is it the ability to create emotions in people? To tell a story? Some combination of all of those. I think a lot of the disdain for screens comes from their lack of novelty. We spend nearly every waking moment looking at screens these days. Why should I fly to California to look at a screen when I can look at a screen at home? Although the original ride sold itself on its scale and technological advancement, its main goal was to immerse riders into the world of Jurassic Park by physically recreating the dinosaurs and the park.
And then we realized we really had to create that three-dimensional live dinosaur in front of all the guests, and that's when the challenge really became intense.
Theme park attractions are a very physical experience in a way that we don't get to experience much these days. Your fragile, squishy human body is being moved around by huge machines as you take in the actual space that you're traveling through. The sheer excess of creating a massive, expensive physical thing for the purpose of pure amusement is intoxicating. The sense of scale that comes from being next to huge moving bits of machinery like animatronics is unmatched. These things could probably kill you. Amazing. It's tempting to group things like screens under the general umbrella of technology and to say that all technology is equal. Those who argue for these new approaches often draw a line from puppets to automatons to animatronics to 2D screens to 3D screens to VR and other augmented realities, as if they're all simply the next unlockable node on a tech tree. But I don't know if they are equivalent. I think what's been lost is the tangibility, and that tangibility is a separate concept from whatever technology happens to be creating the illusion. Screens have a sense of unreality about them. You know that you can't climb out of the boat and wrap your arms around the mosasaur however much you want to. Screens are better at mimicking the fidelity of reality, the fine details and smooth movements that often suffer in the trade-offs that need to be made with physical recreations, but I think the janky animatronics feel more real just because they physically exist. Now, I don't hate screens in rides. I think they can be great for adding extra depth and movement to a scene, but it's always disappointing to see them being used as the main attraction. Perhaps it's just that I'm old enough now that I struggle to engage in imaginative play without huge realistic set pieces, or perhaps I should just go back to smashing stocking frames.
Originally, everyone had this scare that the computer technology would put everyone out of work. Directors will sit at a keyboard and punch one button that says D for dinosaur and another button that says C for creature.
I find it interesting that a lot of these discussions echo the concerns that came up during the production of the original Jurassic Park film. There was concern that the human artistry that goes into the models and the puppets and the animatronics would be overwritten by the new computer graphics technology, that some intangible human spirit of creativity would be lost. It's easy to see what can be gained in the pursuit of the biggest and the best, but what gets left behind? Although Spielberg was enthusiastic about the new technology, he also had his concerns. Richard Corliss from Time magazine observed that no film could be more personal to Spielberg than this one. A movie whose subject is its process. A movie about all the complexities of fabricating entertainment in the microchip age. It is a movie in love with technology, as Spielberg is, yet afraid of being carried away by it, as he is.
I hate computers.
Feelings mutual.
Ironically, the creation of the ride embodied all of the themes of the film in real life, even if everything worked out in the end. The entertainment spectacle of the ride had to be the biggest, the best, the most advanced. Competitor companies must be beaten by any means necessary. New technology from these NASA guys was used even after concerns were raised by industry experts. By the way, Sarkoz is still around. They pivoted to AI in 2023, rebranding themselves as Paladine AI. They now work with the US Department of War to make AI-driven flight systems for combat drones. This sucks. I want animatronic dinosaurs instead. The 1990s were a time of pure, unbridled excess and optimism when it came to themed entertainment. And I'm glad we got a really awesome dinosaur boat ride out of it.